When Nancy Van Maren comes to the Billings airport to welcome an arriving traveler, sometimes it's to greet someone she's meeting in person for the very first time. That's because for the past few years, she's been an active part of the refugee resettlement community in Billings, a network of professionals and volunteers that want to make sure newcomers thrive in their new home. She leads a nonprofit called Nations to Neighbors.
Approximately 40% of the world's refugees are children.
Our mission is to promote the successful integration of refugees into the Billings community. And we do that by coming alongside them in lots of practical ways, but also always with a relational element. The U.S. Refugee Admissions Program is highly focused on early economic self-sufficiency, highly focused on getting everybody to work who can work. As a result of that, what happens to the kids? So we began with a focus on youth, and it's maintained, really. It's the biggest part of what we do. We provide educational and academic social support for youth and youth mentorship. And then also we promote English acquisition for adults, also in a relational way, and then just generally community integration for refugees and a few other immigrants in the Billings community.
Nations to Neighbors got its start by resettling Afghans who came to the U.S. after the fall of Kabul in 2021. Since then, it has evolved to play a supporting role in resettlement because Billings received an official resettlement agency in 2024, Lutheran Family Services Rocky Mountains. Resettlement in Billings had happened sporadically over the decades, but the opening of this office made Billings an official destination for refugees and those known as special immigrant visa holders, Afghans endangered by their work for the U.S. government.
So we welcome them at the airport, we make sure temporary housing and culturally appropriate hot meal is ready for them. And then once they're here, my office is responsible for helping to find housing, for helping to find jobs. We offer cultural orientation so that our clients understand the ins and outs of what it means to live on the day-to-day in the U.S. As they slowly become American themselves.
By the end of 2025, the agency had handled 20 resettlement cases. Since cases can be whole families, that comes out to 54 individuals from Afghanistan, Iraq, South Africa, Syria, and Venezuela.
When you're talking about a population that's a refugee or an asylee, the entire grounds of being granted that status means that they have experienced persecution or a well-founded fear of persecution as a result of their nationality, race or ethnicity, their religion, their political opinion, their membership in a social group. Those 5 grounds are a part of what determines whether or not someone is even eligible to be a refugee or is eligible to apply for asylum.
I interviewed a Venezuelan refugee for this story, but decided not to use the recording out of concern for the safety of her remaining family back home. Instead, I asked Van Maren to read for you an English translation of what she told me about her time after she fled Venezuela before arriving here.
I had to start from scratch with everything, and what destroys a human being the most is losing the security of what they have or who they are because you lose your identity, because you lose your ability to move forward. And that's what my government does. It shatters your security, your mental stability. They break you into pieces so you're not able to stand up to them. I tried to be strong and told myself I couldn't cry because my family depended emotionally on my composure. They needed me to be calm so they could be calm too. And for a long time, I adopted a facade of strength that was breaking me inside. And there were days when I felt I couldn't go on. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't bear it any longer, but I had to be strong. The woman who spoke these words is one of the strongest individuals I know.
2025 was a year of whiplash and uncertainty for the resettlement community. Once President Trump took office for a second term, he put the brakes on refugee resettlement.
On January 20th, the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program was essentially shut down. So that meant that the number of refugees coming into our community was going to be very small, if not zero, for the foreseeable future.
A refugee on average goes through 36 months of background checks, medical checks, and security screenings. Those run through 8 different agencies within the US. So there's a lot of vetting and a lot of time that happens before they even travel. So with that executive order halted all of the processing, domestic and internationally, stopped some of them mid travel, and those individuals had to turn around. It halted all admissions into the US. So for Billings, we had 5 cases, that's 25 persons, who had their travel canceled as a result of that.
Amos's office also saw their funding reduced and had to reduce staff from 5 to 2.
It also stopped all of the direct client assistance. So in Billings, we had our newest family, 6 individuals directly impacted by this. They lost the very small amount of federal funds that are used primarily to help secure housing, because housing is the trickiest part of resettlement.
Later in 2025, President Trump reshaped the refugee admissions program for the new fiscal year, setting the admissions ceiling to 7,500, a historic low. He also made the decision to prioritize the white South African population for resettlement, which has been a controversial choice in the wider resettlement community. New developments have only kept adding uncertainty for refugees and their advocates, including bans on admissions from some countries and also scrutinizing the status of refugees who are already here. On January 13th, Minnesota refugee advocates told the New York Times that dozens of refugees in Minnesota had been arrested by federal agents and sent to Texas. This development happened after my conversation with Van Maren, but is related to an unease that's set in over the past year.
There's been a change, right, in this work and what we face each day. But really what keeps me going, I think it comes down to 3 things. One is knowing with great certainty that I'm doing the right thing. The second is prayer. And third is knowing the breadth of support in this community. We know that there are hundreds of people who want the best for our new neighbors.
For her, creating lasting bonds among new neighbors is what it's all about, something she calls the long welcome.
The long welcome really is about relationships. We believe as an organization that relationships have the power of transformation. If you are truly going to be integrated and you're going to thrive, it's probably because of a relationship or 2 or 3 or 6 that you've developed in the community.
Van Maren has now dedicated her life to this work, and it all started with a revelation she had during an experience on a U.S. military base, where she helped process Afghans who fled their country after the U.S. withdrew.
It's really when it became just abundantly clear to me that as a person of faith, as a Christian, it's not optional for me. I am to welcome the stranger. It's just not negotiable. And then the whole New Testament concept of the greatest commandment, one of the greatest commandments being to love our neighbor as ourselves. So who is my neighbor? And I think that has been answered in Scripture. And that's why I'm involved. Yeah. There's no asterisks to Genesis 1:26 that says that we're made in the image of God. There's no little asterisk. As to everybody but, nope, no asterisk.
For Impact, I'm Stan Parker.